loves, welcome to Conscious Chats with Jess
and Susie,
where we have mind-expanding chats about this wild ride of life.
We'll be talking about embodiment, self-mastery, health and wellness, spirituality, and everything else between. Thank you for being here, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
The dark feminine. I'm so excited to talk about the dark feminine. So I've been coming from a space over the last kind of week or so where I've had people push up against my boundaries and kind of I've had people push up against my boundaries. I've had some people like threaten me, and I've had some people give me feedback that was not very nice and not the whole truth. So these can all be considered like shadowy things coming up in my experience, which, Jess and I were talking about before. When you come from the space of like good girl conditioning, people pleasy tendencies, which I would assert most of our listeners could relate to because that's what we come from and that's what we speak to. When these kind of shadowy experiences happen, when people give you criticism or are unhappy with you or threaten you or like push up against your boundaries or ask for more than what you're willing to give, when we're coming from this good girl, people pleasing background, it can be really triggering, and we can go down a bit of a spiral of like, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, and get like really, really upset at the fact that we've hurt other people or that we've let other people down. And the good girl people pleaser is kind of like that pushover archetype of like, if someone's pushing up against your boundaries, you kind of just like, push over, fall over and let them kind of trample on you. And the process that I love to teach and I love to journey through, one of is unlearning the people-pleasing tendencies and unraveling and reprogramming the good girl conditioning. And that involves integrating the dark feminine or the bad bitch, the bad goddess inside you. That's like the complete opposite of the good girl, right? So if like, think of it as like night and day, yin and yang, black and white. The good girl is like, complete pushover, complete people pleaser, yes, woman. The bad girl is like, fuck no, get the fuck out of my face. Like, she's the complete opposite. And that dark feminine bad bitch can feel really uncomfortable to inhabit if you've come from good girl conditioning and people pleasing tendencies. But we actually have to start to integrate her in order to become more whole, complete, in alignment, empowered women. And so there comes a time, and this can even, I've heard it also described as like moving from your little girl to your woman, is like stepping into that woman that's like holding herself and she's fucking got herself, and she needs that bad bitch. She needs that dark feminine to like be that strong, fiery, like anchor into her truth. And I don't know what else I want to say now. I feel like maybe you have something to say.
As you were speaking, I was just, one of my affirmations that I did with my shaman, Phil, Healing Alchemy, he's amazing, was to do with the sacral chakra. And it was about loving and accepting the whole human experience. And it was about letting go of fear, shame, and judgment, but also accepting and loving fear, shame, and judgment as protectors of the true self, as guardians, which is a different spin, but also, I guess, what you're speaking about with the bad bitch energy needed, required, and a lot of the time with this kind of, especially from that background of people pleasing, you're like, yeah, this is good, that's bad. And then you kind of make all these kind of ways of being that, yeah, you're comfortable with. And also though, with that whole people pleasing thing, I had to go through this whole unlearning, because it's like, it's understanding that you can't please anyone anyway, no matter how hard you try. And you could be coming from the best of your intentions, the most purest of hearts. And I've had this happen to me before where someone's like, oh, well, you did this. And it's like, whoa, like that was not where I was coming from at all. I'm sorry you see it like that or feel that way. And before I would take that on and be like, oh my gosh, I've done something wrong. Like, how could I have let this happen? And I'd be going back and trying to figure out how I could have done differently. But it took a few of those times to be like, you know what? There's nothing I could have done. I can't keep beating myself up about this. And I need to kind of like allow myself grace and love and not be like at the whim of this person's whatever they're saying about me that I've done, whatever they're naming as their truth or reality, like having that clearer boundary about it all. But yeah, I don't even know.
Yeah, it's like, I love what you said about, you know, having that like seeing things as good or bad or right or wrong. Like when we have that good girl conditioning, we want to be quote unquote a good girl. And so like, what does that mean? And then we have we have this rule book within our minds of what a good girl does and doesn't do. Like a good girl, she's polite, she has good manners, she's successful but not like too successful, she's not poor but she's not too obsessed with money, she's like, she dresses well but not slutty. Like there's all these fucking rules, right?
She's beautiful but she doesn't know it. She does everything for everyone else but she always has more time for everyone else. Like
Yes. Yeah. Blech. Gross. But then we can, you know, even if you don't subscribe to those particular rules, we can then adopt other rules based on what we've learned. And especially, you know, Jess and I were talking, being on this personal development journey, being on this journey of becoming more conscious and becoming more aware, you know, Jess and I, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have done a lot of personal development things like courses, read books, listened to podcasts, learned about health and wellness and breath work and meditation and all of these amazing practices and things that you can do that are supportive to your health and well-being. But when we come from good girl conditioning, even if we've released some of the rule books of the original good girl, we've brought with us the fact that we need a rule book, and we still categorize all of these things as good or bad, right or wrong. Like, you know, it's bad to drink alcohol. It's bad if I don't drink 2 liters of water a day. It's bad if I eat donuts for lunch. It's good if I get up and meditate in the morning. It's bad if I go to bed later than midnight. Like whatever it is, right? And like objectively, those choices, all of those choices can have positive, better effects on our body or less good effects on our body. But that doesn't make them right or wrong. And the stress that we put on ourselves about these rules is actually worse than the thing itself. Like if I beat myself up about eating a donut for like 2 days, that's worse on my internal system, on my mental, physical, emotional, energetic well-being than the fucking donut was anyway.
Yeah. And to that note, I have done that with food. I've done with the, like, my own business, how many hours I should work and don't work and all that kind of thing. And it's almost like you have that goal, but if it doesn't happen, you're not attached to it. It's not going to take you, it's not going to change your state into the one that is, yes, stressed out about it, beating yourself up, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed. I said I would do this, I wouldn't. And in the past, in my work days at home, my partner would always come home and be like, what have you done today? And although I'd done work, because I felt like I hadn't done enough, I'd be so offended by the question that I'd be like, I worked so hard and I'm overwhelmed and I have nothing to show for it, because it's like, just like you create these rules, there's like different layers to it, right? It's like, just because you have the donut for lunch doesn't mean then you're going to gain 5 kg or whatever. And it's like, but that's potentially why we're choosing in the first place not to have the donut, because maybe we're looking at our body composition or something like that. But it's like we get so hard on ourselves. Get so, it's the attachment that causes suffering. Putting so much power in that as well. Like, and it's also different when it's a choice that we're making, or for myself with my partner, it's like that perspective of what he's really asking and how I feel about the work I've done. But also then when, like you've been saying, you've had other people sort of come at you, it's like they're their whole other person. That's a whole different situation again, because it's like they are responsible for themselves. I am responsible for myself. Whereas if I'm just the one that's responsible with the donut, it's not like I can put any blame on the donut. Right? But then when there's other people involved, it can get a bit more kind of,
you can blame your partner for buying the donut and having it in the house.
Yeah. Yeah. And at least for him and I, it was kind of like, I guess, breaking it down and being like, when you ask this, this is how it makes me feel. And then him sort of being like, that's not my intention. But we also are in a relationship and we have the space to kind of break it down. Whereas there's been other times, I know for me in retail pharmacy, community pharmacy, it's a bit different now because I'm not in such a kind of like mainstream place. So the customers and clients are very different. But yeah, you get these things where people would kind of be going off about the price of medication, or like the availability of medication, or something that was meant to be ordered in and it's not there. It's like there was so much on you, and old me would be like, this is all my fault. How can I make it better? And I'd take it on. I'd be like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like this is my fault now too. And I've gotten better at being like, that's your story. Like, this is totally out of my control. And also kind of just, and again, different spaces in that space. It's not like you'd be like, well, what do you want me to do about it? Like, you're obviously going to be a bit more catering to the customer service experience and apologizing and, you know, trying to make amends. But it was also, for me, a way of like, okay, acknowledging that there's a problem, and then let's focus on the solution. Let's not keep coming back to the problem. And that's something that I even used to do. And maybe that's why I've eventually identified it in other people, and how can we like defer that awareness? Because if you keep ruminating on the problem, like it's that downward spiral, which you've spoken about before, and it just feels shit. And you're not actually going to get anywhere with that. Like, it's not, you're just enjoying this like pity party. And you're like, who wants to join me in this pity party? It's not like, yeah, it's like, ooh. Very dramatic, but you get what I mean. And I also used to do that too. I was like, no, I'm a problem. Like, this is the problem. I feel like this, and I want you to feel like this because I'm feeling like that. And it's just almost the nature of humans. Like, we want to feel that we're not alone in our experience. But yeah, so then with the customers in particular, or even with myself, if I catch myself, it's almost like accepting what's happened has happened. I can't change that, no matter what went wrong, whose fault it was, what was missed. What can we do to make this better? What can we do to make amends with the situation? And sometimes there's nothing to actually do, again, depending on what it is. But it's just interesting how things kind of shift and change. And
and just going into like why we have this good girl conditioning, or why we have this internal story and this internal rule book, and why we feel so bad when we do something quote unquote wrong. I've been reading this book, Existential Kink, at the moment, which is like this really fun shadow work practice. And she said that we all actually have this feeling bad tendency when we've done something quote unquote wrong. And it actually comes from childhood, when like us feeling bad gained us the approval of our caretakers. So like if you're a kid and you didn't clean your room, and then they like, made you feel bad for not cleaning your room, and then you visibly felt bad, then they would love you. Like they would approve of that, because like you're doing what like you're understanding what they want of you, and that is giving them your love. They are giving you their love. Does that make sense?
I think I kind of got it, and then
like by you feeling bad in that situation, you're gaining their love and approval.
Yes, because then they change their tune towards you, because they're like, oh, but it's okay.
Yeah. And even like someone else gave this example of like, in preschool, you're like playing, and then you say like, I don't know, you're a bitch to like Sally, and then the teacher's like, go stand in the corner. So you like go stand in the corner, and the teacher's like, you're not allowed to come back until you say you're sorry. But you're not sorry. Sally is a bitch. But you have to say that you're sorry, otherwise you're not allowed back in class. So it's like we're trained to feel bad. We're trained to feel bad for quote unquote wrong things that we do, because that's convenient for the adults in our lives. And I mean, it's also convenient for society and rules and, people not breaking the law and stuff like that. But then in adulthood, that continues, that mechanism, that tendency continues of feeling bad for doing things that are quote unquote wrong. But it's like about, missing your appointment or offending someone when you actually didn't say anything wrong anyway. And we feel bad for all of these things, or like you say, not doing enough work, when like what even is enough? And we continue this feeling bad tendency from this good girl conditioning that's not helpful to anyone, because it just like drains the life force out of us and sucks our soul out of us. So therefore, we want to integrate the dark feminine, the bad bitch that does not give a fuck. Like, she doesn't give a fuck. She'll burn the house to the ground. She'll rob a bank. She'll like do whatever the fuck she wants to do. And again, this is super far on the opposite end of the spectrum. There's like the two archetypes, the bad bitch and the good girl, or the dark feminine and the like, I don't know, innocent maiden. And so it's like, can we like journey a little bit into the shadow, into the dark feminine, into the bad bitch that does not give a fuck about anything, and bring some of her energy into these day-to-day interactions in our lives, so that when, there's dust on the carpet when your friend comes over, you don't feel like a failure and hate yourself. Because that is not the end of the world. And the bad bitch doesn't give a fuck. But like, can we bring some of that energy into each of these moments and stop beating ourselves the fuck up about every tiny little thing? And also stand a little bit more in our power when someone's pushing up against our boundaries, or when we're, you know, coming from that perspective of like, we're doing things out of the love and kindness of our heart, and people are just like, they'll just take and take and take and take and take and take and take until you say enough. And it's that bad bitch, that dark feminine, that gets to step in and be like, no, this is enough now. Like, no more. Because otherwise we're just going to end up these drained, purposeless, lifeless women. And, you know, I've spoken to women like that, and they say that they feel like a shell of a human because they've lived their life, their entire life, for other people. And they need to integrate this dark feminine, this bad bitch that comes in, and she's like, no, I choose myself, and get to be a little bit selfish and a little bit like, yeah, just like a bad bitch.
Yeah, and it's just as you were saying, they feel like a shell. It's like not just for doing things for other people, it's also like believing other people's conditioning, getting wrapped up in other people's stories. Like, just, I also like that analogy of like the life force draining, because it is like that. All of those lower density kind of emotions, a way of being like, it sucks you dry. And yeah, if we're really looking for that pleasure-filled, juicy, full spectrum life, it's like you have that almost contained, and you need that protector, or the dark feminine, to create those boundaries, so that you're not just like letting it all go to others. And yeah, being selfish is something that I've also had to learn as a form of self-care. And it still comes up because it's so ingrained in society as we grow up, as we kind of see, oh, she got punished for doing that, and so I better not do that. Like, it's like not even you going through it yourself for calling that person a bitch, but even in the classroom, seeing that happen, and be like, oh, I better not, even if someone's hurting me, I better not say anything, because then there's going to cause trouble. And like, the way kids learn at that time is so just like sponge. There's not really any logic there. So as you grow up and as an adult have a bit more ways to kind of see what's logical, what's not, it can be interesting to kind of see what conditionings and programs come up for you to be like, wait, where did this even come from? And that doesn't even make sense anymore. But why am I still like leaning in that way? The tendencies.
That's something I was going to say. Oh yeah, like on, you know, if you're listening and you can relate with like the people pleaser, good girl conditioning, and you see how you know, you see how it would be helpful to start to integrate the dark feminine, the dark goddess, your inner bad bitch. Like, some things that I've, you know, done over the years and have like lent on recently is like, I have this visual recently, like as these things have been coming up, of like the dark goddess inside me. So leaning on the Hindi, I think it's Hindi goddess Kali. Yeah. Do you know much about Kali?
I just know that she's like black and she has a string of skulls around her, and she's like, yeah, I've heard a few stories of Kali where she's like invoked by Durga and is there to like just lay waste to the land.
Yeah, so I don't know much about her. I just know that she's the dark goddess, and she's like kind of scary looking. But I like visualize her like kind of coming up out of me, and she's like sticking her tongue out, and she's hissing, and like she has devil horns. I don't think Kali actually has devil horns, but like that's the visual that I've got. And it's like there's this part of me, because we are all the entirety of the human spectrum. We have everything within us. And when we deny parts of ourselves, we cast them into our shadow and we repress them, and they come out in fucked up ways, in fucked up sideways ways. But when we allow ourselves to integrate every single piece of the human spectrum, we become a more full, whole, complete human whose energy is able to be directed in one direction, and then we actually become way more powerful in every single one of our actions because all of our energy is being directed in the same way instead of being directed off in all of these different ways. Like if you're, you know, a people pleaser and you're saying yes to something, but your whole body is saying no, then your energy is conflicted. And so any action that you take from that place isn't going to be very potent. But when you can integrate all of these aspects of yourself, each action that you take is going to be way more potent because all of your energy is directed in that same direction. Mm-hmm. So yeah, integrating the Kali goddess, or like even like the devil woman inside you, or the dark feminine, or the bad bitch, like whatever you want to call her, maybe you can like visualize this thing coming up out of you that's got like horns and that's like hissing, and she's sticking her tongue out, and she's like, ah, like just like full of this bad bitch dark energy. And that's very powerful. That's a very powerful energy that so many women could use. Mm-hmm. And even the embodiment practices, you know, I teach a lot of embodiment work. So embodiment practices for attuning to this energy is like a sacred rage practice where you're like allowing yourself to release and feel anger, which is one of the emotions that the good girl is taught not to feel. So like let yourself be angry and fucking punch some pillows, scream into some pillows, stomp, growl, hiss, like literally hiss and stick your tongue out and do lion's breath, which is like, if you've never seen it before, yeah, it's like sticking your tongue out and breathing out, like, and it's super fun, and just like do lion's breath and hiss and like get this like almost like demonic dark goddess like expressed into your space, and you'll feel so much more powerful afterwards. If you're feeling like guilty or taken advantage of, or like someone's coming up against your boundaries, or you're uncomfortable to express how you feel, or you're uncomfortable to set a boundary, you're uncomfortable to, you know, communicate openly about something that doesn't feel good, do this practice first and feel that power bubble up and arise within you and use that energy.
And those practices are wonderful. And when I did your course, that was the first time I'd done. I think I may have heard it once before, but I hadn't fully practiced it because obviously with you, we get the space to do it live. Yay. Everyone on mute, please. So punching pillows, yelling, all that stuff. Sometimes I like to put on some really like rap music and just like kind of like gyrate, or like sometimes it is about saying words that you wouldn't normally use, or like just saying like no and being clear. But it's almost like in doing this, we're inviting the shadow or the dark feminine into it. Like we're all comfortable with people pleaser, good girl energy. The dark feminine is needed. It's just part of life. It's part of Shakti. You can't have existence without it. That's why there's the Kali in the Hindu tradition. It's like just this expression. It's another expression of the feminine. And of course, everything is an expression of the feminine because that's the world we live in. The manifest is here because the feminine's devotion and love for Shiva, Shakti Shiva, expressing so he could know all parts of him. That is the origin story according to Hindu, which we might talk about another time. But in saying that, it's not about, okay, now I'm going to channel my bad bitch and then cast out my good girl. No. It's like both of them get to come together and integrate. Sometimes because we've been in the good girl so much, we really do kind of have to swing into the bad one until we find that balance of the pendulum. Maybe it does require us to go a bit far than we feel comfortable. Like here is already uncomfortable, but to fully come to the embodiment and the full spectrum, it's like really pushing yourself along the end. And these practices give you a safe space to do that without actually letting that out on anyone else. So there's not other people in your life being like, she's a bitch because she did X, Y, Z. Like you're trying to integrate it yourself so you can come from the space of love, yet having those firm boundaries. And it's love for the other person and love for you. And yeah, a lot of the time, because in this space of personal development, it's like, obviously you're always looking at what you're doing and what you can do better. And when other things come up, because I guess you've gone into all the stories that you've created yourself, you're kind of able to potentially see where other people have come from, or understand a bit more what they're expressing, even though they might not be able to see it themselves. It's like you have a peripheral vision to that. And of course, you as an individual cannot understand fully the experience of another individual. Like, there's just no way. We're just not the same people. Where am I going with this? The dark femme. So whenever I feel like people are kind of embodying their dark feminine, and I feel a little bit kind of offended or something, like I watch myself, am I taking this personally? Is this really something for me to take on? Or is it them just not having able to kind of like integrated all that? And the other aspect of that is I as well have had moments where I've like, not as a people pleaser especially, it's like yes, 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 yes. And then you end up really feeling annoyed and angry. Like, one thing I used to do at my community pharmacy was take all these extra shifts because I was trying to be helpful, because they were really desperate, not maintaining my boundaries. And then I'd have all this resentment towards it. But the thing is, all they did was ask. I could have always said no, but then I'm putting all this resentment on them. And then I was like, wait a second. Like, this is just because I've let myself down. This isn't anything on them that I get to then blame and project. Like, I'm like, no. If I am the true creator of my reality, and everything that exists within me is here to be like realized and understood and be felt and seen, it's like, how have I contributed to me feeling like this in this situation? And a lot of the time when you do kind of those practices, you realize, well, I let it get this far. Like, and then the blame that was cast on others then is like, oh, I see how I contributed to this. And then the power's also back on you. You're not like putting it on other people. You're not playing into this victim story. And you're like, okay, well, now I've understood that and learned that about me, what I need. Now I'm going to have to actually get uncomfortable with and start asserting that dark, feminine woman with boundaries who actually says no. And initially that is uncomfortable, but you get better and better. And you're better for it, they're better for it, you have a better relationship for it, whether it's with an actual person or a situation, or, you know, like, it's just so interesting to me how I guess I've been on that full journey of blaming others, and then being able to, with the personal development, kind of be like, oh, how have I contributed, and where is the power back in me? Because I think I got to a point where I was like all the yoga teachings and everything is like, you are powerful, you are infinite potential. And I was like, why the fuck do I not feel like this? Like, and part of that is because I wasn't integrated in my full wholeness. And then I was putting all that power on other people and letting other people dictate my life. So the dark feminine is also the one who is going to protect her ego. It's the one who's going to, define what's right and wrong for you, and then not let other people kind of push you over in that regard. And it's also something that's always changing. Like, I know when eventually I have a family and children, I'll probably be a lot more comfortable with asserting like what is okay and what is not. Whether, you know, I've heard many stories from my friends with kids at school where they've had to go in and be like, what is going on? And I've been like, oh, wow, that's like a lot to like go in there and be like, why is my child blah, 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 or why are they being taught this? But then I can also understand that at that point when I'm that woman and my responsibility isn't just myself, but it's for another, it's like there's more requirement for you to kind of step up and have those boundaries. So different things can also require more of the dark feminine energy to come alive and to step in. And
yeah, the ferocity of the mother.
But we need her, like, yeah.
Yeah,
Who's going to protect the lion cubs?
totally. I love what you said about the people pleaser and like the victim, because the people pleaser loves to be a victim. People pleaser fucking loves to be a victim because it's so much easier to just say yes and yes and yes and yes and then resent and blame everyone. That's easier. And, you know, I've totally done that. And I know, you know, you just shared that you've done that. And that's a really important realization for anyone that has people pleasing tendencies, is that like it's easy to be the victim and to blame everyone else and to say that everyone else sucks and that I'm just a nice person and everyone takes advantage of me and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, you're the one that created that. You're the one that said yes or didn't say no or didn't express how you felt. And that's actually each of our responsibilities. And on this journey of stepping more and more into our power is claiming back our power, but part of claiming back our power also requires us to take full responsibility. And then once we have that full responsibility, then we, from awareness, can be like, oh, I'm the one that has to set the boundary. And then again, that's fucking uncomfortable. So we have to get into that discomfort if we want to change. And then that's when we can bring in that dark feminine to help us assert the boundary. That doesn't mean that it's comfortable. It's still uncomfortable for me to express my truth, to ask for what I need in certain situations, to say no, whatever it is. Like it's still uncomfortable. But I would so much rather do that than the opposite.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty sure it's a huge Spider-Man quote. With great power comes great responsibility. And I told this to my friend on the weekend, which is so funny. She's like, oh no, I don't watch Spider-Man, but I've heard the quote. And I was like, oh, it must be beyond Spider-Man, that it must be like a known thing. But yeah, sometimes we want all the power. We want it. And then we're not willing to be responsible. Like we're not willing to own our choices. We're not willing to own the consequences of our choices, because everything has a cause and effect. And like you, I'd much rather be owning my responsibility and choosing and knowing that from a conscious way. But I've in the past done a lot of choosing unconsciously and then been like, well, this is them wanting to blame other people. But no, it's like there's so much, even though it's been an uncomfortable process, I'm like, no, it gets better and better. And like I get to keep choosing in a way that is more aligned with what is right for me, as I get to understand and know myself better, as I become more in tune with my truth and my intuition, then I'm able to kind of see as well within other people if they're not in alignment as much. And like also that changes as well. Like I'm sometimes then less likely to get into those. It's interesting, the universe always gives you what you need, but you know, I've had less situations as well where I feel like I want to blame other people, because I guess I'm like in a different space. But yeah, I guess the point there is like, and we've spoken about this before, I think, is like your vibration attracts what you're giving off. So when you're a people pleaser, you might be attracting the people that are comfortable with you, and comfortable with you doing everything for them and all that kind of thing. But as you kind of evolve or take more responsibility or choose differently, it's like those people or situations that were benefiting from that drop away. And yeah, you're less likely to find yourself in those similar situations. I don't know if that makes sense, but essentially your whole life changes.
Yeah.
Essentially, when you do the inner work, the outer world changes. And like we know that, but sometimes it's very subtle in the ways it comes through. And sometimes as well, we can be doing something and feeling like we're nailing it, and then something out of the blue comes and we're like, what the hell? What did I do deserve this, or at what point did I actually choose this for myself? And that's where it's always like, for me, giving it up to the universe and being like, okay, show me what it is that I'm meant to learn from this, because this kind of came totally left field, and I didn't realize. It's not like, oh, this has happened to me and it's their fault. And yeah, it's just like a totally different relationship and way of being, like, when these uncomfortable situations come up where I would normally have the tendency and be comfortable in playing the victim.
I heard one time, and I love this so much, is like breaking down the word responsibility. Because like, we talk about either like coming from the victim space or claiming full responsibility, and responsibility can feel like a little bit scary. It's like, oh, like now I'm responsible. But the word responsible is like responsibility, the ability to respond, which is just the ability to take action, the ability to do something, and therefore the most powerful place that you can be in. If you're not able to respond, then like you're powerless. So it's funny how like the word responsibility has these connotations of like, like almost negative, or like this energy of like, yeah, but then I have to do X, Y, Z. It's like, no, you're just able to do something about it.
Able, and you get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. I loved that little breakdown.
Yeah, I love that too. Yeah. And it's easier to go through life being like, well, none of it's my responsibility and this has just happened to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of us is taught that way, like, yeah, and it's depending on whatever our life journey is and our soul purpose, like it's either reaffirmed or it changes along the way. But that's also been a big lesson for me. If I'm claiming responsibility for myself, part of letting go of that people-pleasing tendency is allowing other people to be responsible for themselves, and not taking on their stories, or if they're wanting to blame me, being like, oh, okay, yes, I'm sorry. This is my part of it is like, okay, I can see what you're saying. I'm sorry you feel like that. And not, it's almost like being too empathetic towards it, and that I just kind of helps me to, again, create that boundary. And that's the dark femme, isn't it? Just being like, well, I'm a responsible human and so are you. And like, that's it. And one of my teachers always says, like, if you're not taking care of your business, who's taking care of it? Like, you have to. If you're worried about someone else's business, like, there's no one minding your own. And a lot of the time with that whole thing, it's like, oh, you. What's going on over here? Like,
yeah. One final little thread I want to land about the dark feminine is just like having less judgment towards all parts of ourselves, and being able to integrate all of it as wonderfully, wildly, crazily, kinkily fucked up human. Like all parts of us, any thought, any emotion, the jealousy, the rage, the grief, the apathy, the horniness, the turn on, the bliss and ecstasy and joy, like all of it is human. We came down to this earthly plane from infinite consciousness to experience duality, to experience pleasure and pain, light and dark, good and bad. And the more that we repress the darkness, the more, as I said before, it will arise within us in these sideways ways. So it's like embracing all parts of us, including the darkness, as just a part of us. And like seeing it as like a fun little game, seeing all of it as a fun little game. And therefore, like any experience that you don't like or that is negative, it's like, can you find the part, this is from Existential Kink, can you find the part of you that actually enjoys that, because you are infinite consciousness experiencing duality, and you came to experience it all, not just the pleasure. If there was only pleasure, there would be no pleasure. It's only that because pain exists, that pleasure exists. That pleasure feels good. Otherwise, it would just be nothingness. It would just all be the same. And so, like, releasing our attachment and aversion, which is a yoga thing, a yogic principle, releasing the attachment and aversions to certain things. And can we just enjoy all of it? Can we enjoy the delicious, loving, beautiful parts of life? And can we also enjoy the uncomfortable, yucky parts? Can you find that kinky, shadowy, dark, feminine goddess, Kali, devil woman inside you that's like, fuck yeah, I love this shit. And then it's just a fun game, and then it doesn't matter, and then it loses power over you, and that's the most important part. Because when we have such strong aversions to certain experiences, they have power over us. They control us.
We do everything in our power to avoid them. And then with our attachments, we do everything in our power to seek them.
Yes.
To chase them. And if we don't get them, then we're unhappy, and then that causes us suffering.
Yes, exactly.
It's as you were saying that, the Ganesha story, he's a Hindu god, elephant head. He's got a big round belly and he loves sweets, but he also has his hands out, and one of his palms being open is that no matter how sweet or sour or bitter, whatever it is that is being offered by life in the form of food here with Ganesha, but essentially, you know, whether it's beautiful, whether it's uncomfortable, whether it's grotesque, whether it's violent, whether it's life giving, like he's there for it. His arms are open. He's accepting it. He's appreciating it. And I also love that, because it's like when we are in those moments where we're like, oh, I'd rather not, but here we are. Like, it's like, how can I see this silver lining? How can I take this as a gift from life? That is, there's something here for me to learn, to evolve from, to grow stronger from. It's not just uncomfortable and then it's going to make me less of or take away my power. And yeah, that approach is a lot more empowering, because it's like, no matter what is being given to me, or no matter what experiences here and now that I'm in, literally, what is the gift here? And like, it's really hard to understand that and say that when you're really suffering. But most of the time it's the gift of hindsight, that you can look back and be like, okay, I've finally made peace with that happening, and I'm glad it's happened, because I know I wouldn't be where I am now, who I am here today, without that having happened, whether it was loss or anger or all of the things that in the moment we would have, if we had the choice, been like, no thanks. And we do always have the choice, and we can always choose to close off our hands and be like, no, but it just makes it harder, because you're going to get it anyway. At least that's what.
And, you know, we've all heard, like, you grow through the challenges. Like, you don't grow through the good times, the easy times, the times where you're coasting along. You go through you grow through the challenging parts. And something that I like to do, or that I've heard, you know, from Existential Kink, is like, can you zoom out in the moments of suffering and challenge? Can you zoom out of your personal human experience and see your life like it's a movie? Like, you're the protagonist in a movie, and a good movie has a story arc. It has challenge, it has tension, or like a drama novel or film. Like, there's conflict, there's energy, there's struggle, and that makes it really entertaining to watch. Like, if we watched a movie where the protagonist was just having the time of his life the whole entire movie, it would be fucking boring. So, like, can we zoom out and view our life from that lens, knowing that the protagonist is always going to, like, end up having a great life? And this is just that little moment in the story where it gets interesting. You're like, oh yeah, I'm pining for you. I'm betting for you. Like, I trust you. Like, you've got this kind of thing. And yeah, zooming out from that individualized human experience and just being like, oh, this is a fun story, isn't it?
And I also love that zoom out to just being like, not putting so much weight on being the good girl or the bad bitch. It's like, just choose and see what happens. Like, don't put all this pressure on a single moment. Like, because in the grand scheme of things, when you do zoom out, it's like you always have the choice to choose differently at any given road, but you got to start choosing differently to know any different, to experience any different. And yeah, we can get so attached.
So I'd love to leave you all with one final little reflection. Where in your life can you begin to embody more parts of your bad bitch or your dark goddess? And maybe that's like doing that embodiment practice that we mentioned. Maybe it's doing that embodiment practice once a week. Maybe it's doing it once a day. Maybe it's doing it when you feel angry or frustrated or triggered. Maybe it's setting a boundary. Maybe it's communicating something. Where can you embody your bad bitch a little bit more? And let us know. DM us, message us. We want to know.
And something else as well is just like inviting her forward and being like, what is it that you want me to know? Like, you could journal on it as well, I find, because she's there with a voice and she has reason, she has purpose for being there. And yeah, there's something, if she is coming out and you're suppressing her, or if you haven't sat with her in a while and feel a bit scared, it's like, ask her to be gentle and just start developing that relationship, because she is there for you. She's not there to burn your life down to the ground like Carly. Carly has purpose, and it's from love. That fierceness is from love. So not seeing it as against you, but for you as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you,
lovers. We love you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Conscious Chats. We are so grateful that you're here.
We'd love to stay connected. You can find me on Instagram at sanctuaryonline.co. I offer online classes of yoga, Pilates, barre and yin, on demand and live, and I would love to practice with you.
And I'm on Instagram at Sacred with Susie. Susie is spelled S-U-S-I-E. And I have a variety of offerings on feminine embodiment, emotional mastery, and more, including my signature program, The Fully Expressed Woman. Feel free to send either of us a message on Instagram if there's any conscious chats you want to hear us riff on. Otherwise, have a beautiful day. We love you. Bye.